And that is due to the fact that at that point they are not what we call bebchinas mitzius. So we discussed briefly yesterday, isn't it mitzius? We mentioned this in the principle, but the Rambam says that Elokus is not a mitzius, which means it is present not because it makes room for itself, not because it justifies its presence. It's called Motzei Rishon. Motzei Rishon means there is no preceding element that demands and compels its being. It's completely self-compelling. It also means, but if you delve further into this idea, with your seichel, you find that it is also meaningful to say that there is not non-existence, absence in that truth. It is not something that comes out of non-existent. There is no absence in this fundamental truth. Amiti, it's called Amiti Simotzei, the truth of his presence. We discussed this the other day at a different level. I just want to mention it again because it's extremely significant in. Again, this is not something that seichel can grasp, but nonetheless, this is a principle with each one of us that non-existent doesn't exist. There is no such thing as nothingness. It is Godliness that provides for everything. Not only Godliness, but God Himself. The mashal for that, for us, that kind of makes sense of this is the host and the guest. So we understood it, we discussed it from various angles. We understood that the very presence of the host, without doing anything, makes things real. And then he can start developing a whole setup. But this presence is not something that he's providing by giving something, by doing something. It's a presence of reality. And in that presence, there is everything. Everything is there by virtue of its truth, and nothing displaces anything. Because it's all there because of its truth, not because it carves a place for itself. Vehamashal bazeh yodua mekiches hanefesh. Vehamashal bazeh, right there in the middle of the page. The mashal for this concept is well known, that we can draw from koiches hanefesh the koiches hanefesh. What do we know about koiches hanefesh? Shebevadai was surely nimtzoyim klulim be'esem hanefesh. Surely the koiches are present, klulim included, be'esem hanefesh, in the very essence of the nefesh. In simple terms, it means the nefesh has the ability, has the koyach, to see, to hear, even though sight and hearing, as we relate to it, as we know it, is on a physical level. That is, that the sight and hearing can also be brought down on the physical level. But when it is on a physical level, it also is a koyach that is an essential koyach hanefesh. This is a very important principle to understand, that everything that we experience begashmis is not merely a gashmistic reaction. It's a real koyach. The koyach hanefesh, but the koyach hanefesh has descended into a gashmistic level, so that he can even have the yin from sight on the gashmistic level. I want to discuss this a little bit, although we already discussed it many times. Everything that a person experiences, if this is merely superimposed upon him, it's forced in him. In other words, you have no choice but to see, no choice but to feel when you bang a hand that it hurts. But not that hurting is something that makes sense to the nefesh. It should be this way. It's imposed. So this is a very important thing, because the worldly view of sight is that it is a reaction to the force of the energy of the light. And from that perspective, the human eyesight and the camera sight is identical. It's the same thing. The camera sees and the human eye sees. The camera has no idea why it sees. It's just that it's forced into it, and the light is reflected in it. The human eye is identical, is exactly the same way. The fact that then he makes sense of it in seichel, that's his own business. And we say, no, that is a totally false explanation of the phenomenon. Because if this were true, then after a person sees something, he would still have to convince himself that it's true. The fact is that once he sees something, no convincing is necessary, and there's no greater convincing than seeing it. The reason for that is that when you see, this is the nefesh itself seeing.
The reason for what? The reason that sight is so real is because it's a nefesh faculty.
That's right. You see it because it's real. It's true. You don't need any further convincing. There's no greater convincing than sight. Whether it is eyesight or ears aseichel. So these are koiches ha-nefesh. The nefesh is truth. The level, the truth of the nefesh can also absorb and relate to external things if the nefesh identifies them as truth, like in sight.
There's a good illustration for this. You've seen already optical illusion.
Sure.
When a drawing can mean two different things.
Right.
So sight can see either or, and the nefesh can see that it is an illusion.
Well, optical illusion, you have to understand, it actually poses a problem with this principle. Optical illusion means that you convince that you see it, and it's not real. It's not true. That we have to discuss separately.
Okay.
But we all know that sight is the final arbiter. I've seen it, and there are no further doubts. Because these are koiches ha-nefesh klulim b'yatzem ha-nefesh. Even though we see, we're going to see in a minute. V'shom yishkenu kulam yachad. There in the nefesh, they dwell, they rest, all koiches together. In the same nefesh, in the same nekudas ha-nefesh, in the same truth of the nefesh, all the koiches are resting together. The K'moishe heim behis galos, which means that as the koiches and the state and the koiches are behis galos, on a functional and revealed level, hare, so then kol koyach hu b'kli chetz. Every koyach, each koyach is in its unique koyach, keli, a separate keli. Ukmoi, as it is by koyach ha-chochma. The koyach ha-chochma is b'moyach ha-chochma, is imbued and rests in the moyach, in the brain, and that part of the moyach which is called moyach ha-chochma. The koyach ha-bino, and then the koyach ha-bino rests b'moyach ha-bino, in the moyach, that part of the moyach of the brain that is the bino quality. And further, you'll be ayin. And then sight is in the eye, etc. Once we come to the ear by eye and sight in the eye, then it becomes clear to us that every koyach really has a unique place. They don't mix. They cannot dwell together. When we talk about koyach ha-chochma, koyach ha-bina, and the kli ha-chochma, kli ha-bina, that we need special insight to understand how these koyches are in individual kelim. But when it comes to the iyo, etc., these are the koyches which function on a physical level completely, And at this physical level, each koyach, in fact, clearly has its own unique keili. Not only is it a separate keili, but it's unique, meaning it has affinity with that koyach and no other koyach. It can only relate to sight, and it cannot relate to hearing. At this point, when they are at a function level, in the gilui, then each koyach assumes its own parameters, its own presence, and thus it has to be in a separate case. They cannot dwell together. The reason they cannot dwell together is that they're actually contradictory one to the other. Just like Chochmah and Bina, similarly Re'iyah and Shmiya. Let's briefly discuss this. When we see a table, we see in sight we see the reality of the table. What is the reality of the table? The top board, a table, that table serves as a table. The fact that it's supported with legs, and that the legs are attached to the board in a certain way, and that it stands in a certain place, is totally non-functional when it comes to Kiyach Re'iyah. When we see the table, we see its reality. It's not a board on four legs. It's a table. It's a concept that has been rendered on the Gashmic level. But what do you see? You see the concept, not the Gashmi. This is the way it is in the Re'iyah. If you were to describe in Bina what a table is, you would describe its complete structure. Not only what it does, but how it does it. If sight were short of seeing how the table stands, in other words, he would be doubting the standing capability of the table. You couldn't relate to the table in sight. Sight cannot come through that process of question and answer, from nothing and into something. How does the table stand? That's not the way you see it. You see the reality of it stands. How it stands is way below the level of sight and level of chokhmah. Because as a matter of fact, the reason it stands is because it was made to stand. Why was it made to stand? Because we were making a table. Not the other way around. It became a table because it stands. The other way around. It's made to be stand because it's a table. This is the way it is on the level of Chokhmah. This is the way on the level of sight. In Bina, it is the other way around. It becomes a table only when you have a board and 4 legs and it's made to stand, then it becomes a table.
That is an opposite perspective.
Opposite process and opposite perspective. These two perspectives cannot dwell simultaneously.
Meaning once they're at the level of expression, they don't...
You don't have the feel that this is a table from the Chokhmah perspective.
I mean, ultimately they do need to integrate, and the person has...
They integrate
these
because
faculties.
one supplies the information to the other. Let's go back to principle said before. You said I said it. If the principle of Moshe Rishon is known to you by some kind of a logical proof, that's not Moshe Rishon. Moshe Rishon is a self-standing truth. That's what the Rambam goes on and says, Amit is Motzei, the truth of his presence. If you cannot relate to Amit is Motzei, you don't have a Moshe Rishon.
But yeah, we do say that Bina needs to look to Chokhmah.
Bina, that's right.
And be guided by it.
Bina is illuminated by Chokhmah.
So
but it has it on the Bina level, not on the Chokhmah level. Bina is a phenomenal Inyan. It takes the Chokhmah, brings it down to the Bina. But it has it on the Bina level.
Which in the table mashal seem to be all about sequence and construction and doubt, questioning how will it stand?
How was it playing?
Yeah.
The whole, we understand this. We don't need to. So this is an important thing. This is the pshat. At each koyach, it's a koyach ha-nefesh. The nefesh compels the koyach ha-chokhmah. The nefesh compels the koyach ha-bina. In the nefesh itself, they're both equally compelling and both present at the same time. But as they are expressed on a functional level, in the koyach level, they have to have each individual place, both in terms of koyach in the kelim, and in its own time to function. Let's go a little further, but on the 4th line. That although that they are separate keches one from the other, and when we say muvdolim, we don't mean they're separate keches. Muvdolim means they have to be separate because they cannot go together, because one interferes with the other. זה בבחינס אש וזה בבחינס מים. חוכמה ובינה, חסד וגבורה, ראי ושמיע. זה בבחינס אש וזה בבחינס מים. They're very different, and they interfere with one another. Mayim, we say, just to talk about Mayim and Amri'ah. Mayim descend in Mokim Govei and Mokim Nalmon. They descend smoothly, without any kinks. They don't have to make their way. They find their way automatically. That's Choch. If you find water underneath the mountains, you don't ask, who brought the water down here? The water found their own way there. Bina, everything that you have in Bina has to have been brought there. So, in essence, they're Keches Muvdolim. Even as they are in the Nefesh, they're Keches Muvdolim, they say, Bina, this is Chochmah. And yet, Yish Kenoi Lachet, they coexist. This we have to discuss further. But this is an interesting thing. They coexist together with outside they interfere with one another. But within the Nefesh, they're all complementary. Because there is a Nefesh level of truth expressed through each one of these kodesh. They're there because of the truth of the Nefesh itself, not because of their own place. All right, so this will be it for this morning. Okay, Baruch Hashem. I don't know.
Quiero la